let's clear up for people that don't really know like what Shibari is.
So Shibari, the way I've learned to understand it, is a Japanese erotic art that can have multiple ways of being implemented. It could be done for artistic reasons. It could be done for a hobby, with you and somebody you trust, to create beautiful patterns, and with those patterns to create beautiful figures with their body. And it's a very just nice quality time, which doesn't have to have anything sexual about it. It doesn't have to have any sadism and masochism. It doesn't have to have a power exchange, domination, submission. It doesn't have to have any of that if you don't want that. It could be just done for the art, for beautiful, gorgeous pictures. I also love taking such. I hope they're beautiful and gorgeous, but at least I like taking such pictures. They can be an absolute pure form of art because it portrays a person and their body being vulnerable, but also it could emphasize on their strengths, on the contrast between the soft human skin and the rough looking rope. So that could be very attractive, and for a lot of people that's enough, and absolutely that's completely fine. That's not entirely satisfying for me, and that's for that reason there are a lot of people who are also interested in adding more flavor to it, like domination and submission. They could add sadism and masochism if they're into playing like this. So there are different levels that I could separate Shibari. There is the artistic form, which I usually call, into the box of which I put Shibari. And when you add the additional BDSM elements of it, the domination, submission, sadism, masochism, power exchange, and such, then we go to the name of Kimbaku. Some call it Kimbaku, some call it Kimbaku. It's a bit of a uncertainty, but I believe it's Kimbaku. People say that Kimbaku begins and Shibari ends when you're, for example, in bondage and you want to get out. At that moment, if you continue, in the sense that you have already negotiated that you would want to get out, but you also don't want to be let go. This also touches upon the topic of consensual non-consent. You have agreeing to be told no when you assert your will. To a degree, of course, there has to be some safety measures to agree that, hey, if you really have a problem, if something is really necessary, of course, you always have the right to withdraw your consent. And if that is not honored, that becomes a criminal activity, and nobody wants to get into that. But so there is there's Shibari, more as I said, the artistic form. There is the Kimbaku, where is the more BDSM related one, and there is also when it's about rope torture, which is a more intensive form of sadism, masochism in Shibari. It's called Semenava, which basically translates into rope torture. And also,
how old is it? Sorry, like, do you know like how it came about? I
think its origins, if I'm not mistaken, are around the 1600s, at the beginning of the 1600s, where the samurai used rope because it was quite abundant. Unlike other, I think they didn't have as much metal available in comparison to jute and hemp. And cotton. I'm pretty sure. So they started restraining their enemies and prisoners and criminals with rope, and eventually they started developing different beautiful patterns. Each village developed its own style, which it kind of kept more secretive. And even as far as I know, when they were transporting a prisoner from one village to another, they untied the prisoner from the one pattern and they put the other pattern from the other village to the other one. And it was very important. There were a few rules that they were, as far as I know, were following. The bondage needs to not harm the person in it, so it needs to be safe, and it needs to be aesthetically pleasing. So they emphasized quite a lot on that, and the period of that martial art, which was called Hojujutsu, ended, I think, in the sort of beginning of the 1900s, and maybe around my English is failing me, 1930s.
Yep.
I think around then some erotic images, more or less porn related, emerged in Japan. Unfortunately, I forgot the name of the artist, but they became quite notorious about it, and I think they started the perception of using rope as a more erotic form of art. And then about the 1970s, it blossomed a lot more. It became more popular around the world. The Americans, when they visited, for example, Japan, they saw it there. They heard the word shibari, which means tying. And they said, okay, that sounds easy, and let's call it shibari, where we are going to be practicing it in America, for example. And then a while later, the Japanese said, well, that's kind of convenient, so we are also going to call it, relate to it as shibari. So it became quite worldwide spread all over the world, with very big communities developing. And yes, there are different masters, there are different schools, people who've become known with their skills. And also, yes, in Japan there is a sort of more of a traditional approach where you need to learn from a master. They need to accept you in their own I forgot the Japanese word.
Dojo, school.
Maybe dojo school. Yeah, their school. So you could say that you're their apprentice. You could continue with their work. In the Western world, it's not that valid, but it still holds value. Definitely does. And I also learned from people who've been to Japan, learned from different masters. And like many of us Westerners, I like to pick from different styles. I like this approach in this situation. I like this style. So I just decide from that palette of tools which one I want to use with the mood I have and the scene that I want to create. But yeah, there are different masters in Japan that you can learn from.